Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yeah, welcome to African News Review. This is your regular weekend catch-up where we look at Africa as framed in the Western press. With me, as usual, is beginning with ladies, is Fubara Eneli Esquire, host of Rethinking Freedom on 98.5 Killeen, and the author of Amazon's bestseller, Kwanzaa, A Celebration Guide for Home and Community. Yeah, do get your copy. And welcome, sister. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Greetings.
Greetings. And the gentleman needs no introduction. His book, Manufacturing Hate, How Africa was demonized in the Western press, formed the genesis of this program. And so...
Are you going to hold up your book? Please do. I'm traveling. I don't have mine here. Please do.
Okay. So, Africa Illuminated, revealing the continent's remarkable facts. That's myself, my humble self name there. And hopefully that will be...
And obviously, the message here is we encourage more of our people to write.
Yes,
the information that you know, what is the use if you're just keeping it for yourself? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Okay. So, welcome everyone. And yes, let's begin. News from where you are at, please. Let's start with the sister.
What is happening in my neck of the woods? It's really more of the same, of course. This is nationwide. The quote-unquote Epstein files dropped, but didn't really drop because...
It was heavily redacted.
Like reams of black pages. And then a picture of Diana Ross, whom I happen to really love her music. Picture of her with Michael Jackson and Bill Clinton with her children. But what they did was they blacked out the faces of the children and put it in the Epstein files so that it looks like somehow they were involved in this. It was a picture taken at the White House at a totally different event with her own children. Wow. So the subterfuge and the lies and the redactions and all of that, and in the meantime, they're throwing all of these other things up in the air to keep us unfocused is really interesting. So we're definitely seeing that here in where I live. The other thing is our state had approved for public money to be used as vouchers for students to go to private schools. But there is a particular time when that money gets released. And what some of the schools have done is the deadlines to apply to their schools is before the voucher money. So in other words, the people who are probably going to apply and get in are the ones who already had resources. Then they would get the money when the money is released from the state. But the poor people who stupidly, and I will use that word, stupidly voted for this voucher program, thinking that this would be a way to step their children up, are probably still going to be closed out for a lot of different reasons, but just a few things happening in our area.
Okay. And
right. So the good thing with in terms of the Epstein files, and I like that sister opened with that, is that there's just too many out there that sooner or later unredacted stuff is going to be sold to some sleazy publication and it will come out, So I'm confident about that. In this country, money, it talks a lot, right?
Yes, it does.
And then to me, locally, what is of great concern is how Trinidad is being used as a beachhead by the United States to undermine and eventually perhaps invade Venezuela. I'm just hoping that, because obviously this is Marco Rubio's war, I don't think Trump particularly has a big appetite for it. I think he is much more keen in getting the Nobel himself next year. And I think he realizes that a Venezuela war, that is something that will not end overnight and would still probably be continuing next year, is probably not good for his, so his selfishness and ego may at the end, I hope, prevail, but anything is possible when you have a reckless collection of people with so much power. So that is,
And for those who are not paying attention, the speech by the Prime Minister
yes,
of
that's
Trinidad
exactly
and
what I was talking
Tobago
about.
was quite jarring. So are they basically signaling that they're going to exit CARICOM?
I have not understood it. She was saying our trade with the United States is more than 40%. With Venezuela, it's like 0.000. Like, this lady is nuts. What's going on? It's as if some right-wing conservative in the United States drafted that speech for her, And the problem is the audience was clapping too,
Okay, so while all of that was happening, there was an ambassador who was accredited to the United States from here, Christian Thompson. He's going to be the UK ambassador to the United States. But the United States also then agreed that an ambassador will be going out to South Africa in the name of Leo Bozell. For those who don't know, Leo Bozell III in the 1980s actually supported apartheid. So you know what's coming.
Well, he's on the same page with Trump then.
Exactly. So you're sending an apartheid sympathizer to South Africa while the idea of the so-called white genocide is on. It can basically a recipe for disaster. So, we'll continue to watch what his movements will be in his new post. But it does.
What I like about this current President Trump is that he does not hide exactly who he is, right?
I think he's too deranged to do that. He's too far gone.
Absolutely.
To be subtle about anything.
Why could it be surprising that he's sending a booster of apartheid as his ambassador when he's saying you Africans are committing genocide against Europeans? When in fact the Europeans own 72% of the land and make 8% of the population. European unemployment is 8%. African unemployment is 40%.
It goes without saying that white supremacy will do what white supremacy does. What's his name? Gerald Horne wrote a superb book titled Confronting White Supremacy. White Supremacy Confronted. And in there, it lays out the case that the United States has, from time, even regardless of the peaceful governments, have batted for the Europeans with regards to their trappings within the Southern African sphere. Be it in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, or Namibia or South Africa, as the case is now, it is always centered about corporate interest, not the people do not matter.
In the Oxford Union debate speech, Malcolm X said, I prefer the racist apartheid regime that let me know exactly where they stand than the United States that preaches integration but practices segregation and racism. So he said it in 1964, December. That still applies today perfectly.
Wow. Speaking of where the lives of people count for nothing, we go to Congo for our first story. And this story is coming from Radio Deutsche Welle, the German outlets, which says the U.S., DR Congo, U.S. pressure forces M23 to retreat from Uvira. The M23 rebel group withdrawal from Uvira under U.S. pressure could reshape dynamics in eastern DR Congo. The question is Rwanda's influence weakening, or this is just a tactical pause? And it goes for the Rwandan-backed M23 on Tuesday to withdraw from the key city of Uvira in the eastern DRC of Congo following a request from the United States. The rebels entered Uvira near the border of Burundi and Rwanda last week. days after the Congolese and Rwandan government signed a peace accord in Washington, D.C. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the Rwandans' actions violated the UK-US brokers deal and vows to take actions to ensure promises made to the president are kept. Rwandans have repeatedly denied supporting M23 as blamed Congolese and the Burundian forces for the renewed fighting. What do we take from what is currently going on now, considering, yes, they did sign a peace deal, a business deal, as it were, not really peaceful deal? So the question would be to Sister, would we say this retreat is in good faith or just simply because the big dogs are now involved in extracting businesses and extracting resources, and we're going to be seeing more of this in the coming years to come?
Well, I guess my question would be, how much of a retreat has it been? Because the fact that they might leave the main cities, the minerals are actually out in the quote-unquote more rural areas, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And so I don't know how much of a retreat that really is. I think that to the extent that these people just want to extract the minerals from the area, the people of Congo are of no consequence. And if M23 can figure out a way to continue to siphon off what they siphon off without interfering with the United States' bigger scheme to siphon off, I think that they will coexist, quite frankly, because ultimately none of these external forces want stability in that area. None of them want a strong Congo. None of them want to center the people or their needs. It's not about the sovereignty of that nation. So a number of observations. First of all, Rwandans' continued denial, even in the face of all of this evidence. And if it's not Rwanda, the government sponsoring M23, how come they have a place on your side, in your country, to launch whatever attacks and excursions into the Congo? And what are you doing about that? So that would be one of the things that I would say. But what is completely unfortunate as I look at the whole situation is that we continue to rely on outside groups, external forces who do not have the best interest of the people to determine what happens. And I just don't see how this so-called brokered peace changes the day-to-day lives of the people of Congo. Now we might say, okay, the slaughtering doesn't continue in that way, and that would be a huge improvement. But just in terms of the long-term effects of constantly extracting, not adding value to the people and to their country, I don't see how that changes, even with what's going on right now.
Comrade?
All
What's
right.
your take?
So, I think if it was not last week's episode, maybe the week before, I pretty much repeat what I said. I said if Congo is savvy, Congo should use the period in which this so-called deal is in existence to leverage that to build up their own armed forces. And if I'm in Congo's place, I would do exactly what has so far transpired. You've already sold out, so you may as well take advantage of your selling out, right? So I would say, we have a deal with you for the minerals. But look what Kagame is still doing. They're captured this city. They're causing violence. You're generating, 700,000 new refugees. How could you extract these minerals in light of this humanitarian catastrophe? And then, of course, the U.S. would say, you're right. And they would pick up the phone and remind Kagame that, listen, we do have drones, So tell M23 to withdraw. And that's the kind of request that they made. When they said the request was that if you don't obliged, then of course we will speak with drones. And that's what Rubio was saying when he said, take action. You don't take action with words, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to deploy men or boots on the ground. So then the only other alternative is drones. They won't hit Kagame, but they will hit M23 deployed in Rwanda.
Okay.
And they can always, say this is an occupying army. They have UN authorization. And it was clear when the U.S. ambassador to the UN, not even mincing words, last week, and people should go and listen to that, said Rwanda is in control of M23. Rwanda has set up other organizations within Eastern Congo that is directly controlled by Rwanda. And we will take action against any spoilers of this agreement. And the Rwanda ambassador sitting right there could not say a word. How are you going to go toe-to-toe with the U.S. when you're also dependent on the U.S.? So that is what's transpiring. Now, the obvious question is this. If you can ask them to get out of Uvira, and they did, why don't you ask them to get out of the entire country now?
Exactly, and that's my point. Why not out of the entire country? And then here's the other thing. I mean, because we're talking about a larger system here. Let's say that based on all the information we have, it's Rwanda behind M23. Where are they getting their resources from? Who are they getting arms from? So there's so many entities that are involved with this that if we're really serious, you could cut it off at the source. Someone is selling these arms to them that allow them to go and do the things that they're doing in Congo. But we really don't want to resolve the issue.
No, they don't. You're right. That goes back to what you said earlier, sister. You said they don't want Congo to be strong. And that's precisely why they're not asking them to withdraw completely, because they want to have pressure that they can leverage on Congo as well.
Yes. There you go.
Right. But yes, Kagame.
Congo is in that proverbial between a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely. 100%.
So one final question on this, and then we'll move on, which is, since we know that Rwanda exercises decisive control over the M23, why is it that the United States is reticent about applying sanctions on Rwanda?
No, I think we answered that already, because they want enough pressure to remain on Congo as well. Otherwise, Congo can say, this deal we cut with you? Now we are too strong. We don't need you anymore.
We don't, yes. Our problem has been eliminated. We don't need you anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they want enough squeeze, but they want Congo to continue breathing enough for them to get the minerals they want. And I have one other beef with this article. Why are you quoting Jason Stearns, a European, when Congolese can say the exact quote that Stearns said? Go to Friends of the Congo that have been working for like over 15 years now to highlight these atrocities. You're running to a European American at NY.
Well, I mean, because it helps to buttress the point that, or reinforce the idea that stability comes from the West, that Africans are incapable of resolving their own issues, that we lack sovereign power over systems, and that violence persists in Africa because they're incapable of peace.
Right.
We're just those kind of, these unruly children who just can't get along. And so there's always going to be a need for the presence of the first world to stabilize our places. Of course, they're looking to stabilize their interests, not actually the people. So, yeah, we don't need to hear from any African. They're not even capable of anything. Why would we quote them?
Yep, and it's up to us to keep demanding. That used to be the case in the United States when so-called liberals spoke for African Americans. Used to be the case when European so-called liberals spoke to the anti-apartheid resistance in South Africa. And we as Africans must demand that Africans are the ones that should articulate the issues on the continent.
Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight. Yes, and speaking of articulating, Rwanda seems to be articulating its need not to be seen in bad light. So, which takes us to our next story, which comes from the Atlantic, and it's about sports washing. And Mr. Kagame seems to like the idea that Rwanda is, well, so the article is in the Atlantic, and it's titled Arsenal Ban PSG and Visit Rwanda sponsorship. We would rather wear anything on our sleeves. But Visit Rwanda is visible on the sleeve of the men's and women Arsenal football teams, as well as advertising boards around the Premier League club main Emirates Stadium. It features on the sleeve of PSG's women's side and on the training and warm-up kits of their men. It also appears on the latter sleeve during the club World Cup this past summer. The government of Paul Kagame, Rwanda's president since 2000, has invested heavily via the country's tourism board on commercial deals with Arsenal, PSG, which is Paris Saint-Germain, Atletico Madrid, and Bayern Munich, and have hosted international sporting events as the UCI Road World Cycling Championship and FIFA's Congress in 2023, where Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, was re-elected unopposed to serve a second full term. So I suppose the question is, why the need for Rwanda to do this with regards to laundering its image?
All right. So
if
I
the
would do
image
the
is
exact thing.
clean.
I would do the same thing if I were in his shoes.
Okay.
He's a clever man. He's very capable, and he knows the importance of propaganda. How can this sports-loving man be behind any genocidal campaign? How can he be issuing orders to eliminate, exterminate unarmed people when he loves sports so much? So that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. The only problem he has, of course, is that these images, these rosy images, are consistently not matched up on what is being done on the ground, right? Yeah. And that's the problem he's facing. But in terms of this campaign, I think the article says he pays up to 10 billion pounds,
10 million
I think.
Yeah. 10 million
but
a year.
Then we are told that the revenue from tourism exceeds $600 million. So it's like peanuts for him. It's worth it.
Yeah.
It's a very smart propaganda, but I like the fact that the article says that other groups that support these sports teams are also coming up with the counter propaganda now, which is exactly what needs to be done. They're countering it. I think the article says that one group that is opposing this cozy relationship with Arsenal, the respondents to their own campaign, 90% of them want this contract to end once it expires next year. So that's a very good sign that people are waking up to the fact that these campaigns are just meant to gloss over and really disguise and hide the massive human rights violation that the government of Rwanda has been involved in domestically and regionally as well.
Yeah. Sister?
Well, I think it's a really smart move on his part, as you said, Comrade Milton, because it's worked for the UAE, hasn't it?
Exactly.
It's worked for Saudi Arabia. It's worked for Dubai. I mean, yeah. What do we call it? I'm trying to remember the legal term. Laundering. It's a great way of laundering money and making yourself look altogether nice and clean and shiny in that way.
Yep.
And perhaps having all of these connections or sponsorships, if you will, also gets to the issue of Western countries don't come after us because there is goodwill out there towards us, if you will. And so to the extent that these different sports entities or groups have not divorced themselves from the UAE where they get money thrown at them, I actually think it's funny and hypocritical that now they have some moral sense when it comes to Rwanda, but I'm glad that they do. I'll take it. Having said that, I'm going to come back to the issue of African nations, and we just talked about Trinidad and Tobago, looking at things from just the lens of my little nation and what I'm trying to accomplish, and not caring if they accomplish it by harming other African people.
Africans, yeah.
Yeah.
And that is an issue when we talk about Pan-Africanism. At what point do we start looking at ourselves as a whole and understanding that we really only win when we're unified?
Sister,
and so, yes,
actually, it's not even just winning now. Now it's about our survival, you see?
Yeah, it is survival. It is definitely about survival. I agree with you. And so these companies that are just capitalists themselves, so whoever gives us money, we don't really none of this information is new. So now that they're saying, oh, now we're going to review for next year or whatever, you had the same or should have had the same information when you got into bed with them in the first place. What's interesting is also when we talk about the lack of education or the lack of information on the continent itself and just with the African diaspora, is hearing the Rwandans, according to this article anyway, and I can totally see it, so proud to see their country represented, and look at us, and we are the new rising giant of Africa, if you will.
Yeah.
Even though they understand that so much of what Rwanda is doing is harmful to Congo, and they see the effects of the refugee crisis as well.
Right. Yeah.
Just not being able to, besides these arbitrary lines that were drawn, these boundaries, you probably have cousins on the other side of this if you trace far enough, but just not caring. And so again, I wish that African leaders would care about us as an entity and not just their personal goals and desires. I wish that African nations, even as we have been carved up, will again look at things from a Pan-African lens than just the individual nation. And for Rwandans to understand that if today your country is doing this to another country of Africans, someone can come and do that to you as well. And we need to be looking at the broader ethical question about what Rwanda is doing and why they're doing this. And then even if it's just 10 million that he's spending, 10 million is a lot of money. I know that there are good things that they're showing in the Rwandan bigger cities, but by and large in the rural areas of Rwanda, they are still largely underdeveloped. And so could this money not be used to actually uplift the people? But we actually do not want to uplift the people. We don't want them educated and informed, because an educated and informed people are harder to manipulate and to use.
All right. So you said something very important here, that they are proud of whatever they see as achievement. And that is being conveyed mostly in the digital space on social media and all that, right? They know that it's causing a massive humanitarian disaster. Hundreds of thousands of people displaced, thousands or even tens of thousands of people killed. But so long as your universe or your reality is that digital space, it just shows that paradox and contradiction in a very interesting way. I imagine before this era of digital space, digital universe, there was much more appreciation for that kind of humanitarian disaster, because that's what you would be hearing about. You would feel it, you would see it. It would be discussed on radio, in print, right? And that would be the focus of your mind. But now your mind can actually somehow shove that information to the back recesses of your brain, you see? And that, I just thought about that as you were speaking. That's one of the remarkable impacts of this digital universe that our brains now live in,
The perfect dystopian novel would be
Absolutely.
1984.
Yep.
George Orwell's 1984. I mean, Trump reenacted a bit of that dystopian reality this week when he was telling people.
Just a bit?
I think
That's very generous.
I think, Brother Adesoji, that was the understatement of the century.
I think so.
So, yeah, I mean, what can we say? I mean, like you said, until we bust that bubble of dystopian existence, we'll continue. I mean, these guys will continue to think as long as they pay clubs to run around with their badges on their shirts and everything is okay, as opposed to what the real world is experiencing. Speaking,
if I may add one more thing, just thinking about the Roman Empire, thinking about gladiator sports, and then just looking at how sports is being used worldwide. Here in the United States, where in spite of what the NFL did, you could not get a significant number of Black people to say, we're not watching this game anymore.
Nope.
I mean, people are still fixated. You divorce
your
reality from, hey, I need my fix. I need my escape. I need this thing that allows me to act like my life isn't really what it is.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
it's happening on a global stage now, right?
Scale.
Yeah.
One of the things that South Africa hated the most was being banned from the Olympics, right?
Yes.
Said, give us economic sanction or anything, but please allow us to participate in the Olympics, or the World Cup,
And it's really a very effective distraction.
Mm-hmm.
You're watching a handful of people run up and down after a ball. I'm reminded of Yukwama's The Healers at this time, his book, The Healers, where, one of the main characters is basically like, what is the sense of all of this in this competition? But it's really to just keep people occupied and competing and fighting against each other, but not working together. And then look at the amount of time, resources, energy that we throw at being entertained with sports globally, and what we could do with those resources to end suffering for humanity, period.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Speaking of what we could do with resources, Ghanaian students at UK universities would like some of those resources. And for the next story, we'll go to The Guardian, and it reads, Ghanaian students at UK universities face deportation and funding crisis. Group asks Keir Starmer, who is the Prime Minister of Britain, for help to persuade Ghanaian government to pay backlog of student fees and living allowances. A student from Ghana at UK University says they are in danger of being deported after being stranded by their own government without promised scholarship or tuition fee payments. So the group representing more than 100 doctoral students have petitioned Downing Street and Keir Starmer asking for help to persuade the government to pay the backlog of tuition fees and living allowances running into millions of pounds. The president of the group said some have already been deported by the Home Office after the universities withdraw their registration for non-payment, while others have been evicted from their accommodation or forced to borrow money to survive. There's one other part here. So he says the new government, President John Mahama's new administration, was sworn in January, and he found inherited debts to about 110 institutions in the UK worth about £32 million. So, I mean, we're talking about £32 million. Would that £32 million not be best served to build up Ghanaian universities? Or, I mean, we're just talking about Ghana here. I'm sure the same exists for other African countries within the UK educational sector. All of this money that is being taken out to, quote unquote, create the so-called elite class that will then go and use systems that have been debunked in the same sphere again. What are we doing?
Well, actually, I don't oppose sending students for PhD training. Because now, if you really train them, if you treat them well and they come back, they can really, you have a multiplier effect, right? If it's a different thing, if it's just an undergrad degree, which I think we need to train domestically. And that's where I agree with you. Upgrade our institutions, build more so we can upgrade them and train our undergrads domestically. when it comes to PhD, you are now creating a specialized set of scholars who can actually now come and reproduce domestically. So there's logic behind that. But if you're not treating them well, and you're not apparently paying for the training that you sent them to acquire, that is a major problem. Because first of all, you don't realize the risk you're taking, because there are the private companies that could snatch these individuals to work for them. You know, in fact, they should start leveraging themselves, especially the ones who are at the latter stages of their training, saying, you are my home government, you send me here for this training, obviously meaning you want me to come back. But if you're not paying for it, why should I be beholden to you? So I'm making myself available. Now let them start competing for you. They're taking for granted that, the British are going to be lenient. How are you going to expel PhD students? Well, I guess apparently they had not been doing it, but now they're doing it, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm one of those PhDs, I would now leverage by going to private, depending on what your field is, of course, right? Or specialization. I imagine you can go to a corporation and say, listen, if you're willing to cover the remaining cost of my training, I'm already 80% there, I can come and work with your corporation. Boom. If they start getting deals like that, lo and behold, watch and see how the Ghanaian government is going to find a way to to pay off these arrears within a matter of months. Right now, they're taking them for granted that what can these students go anyway? So now they're actually appealing to the British government, because sometimes they know also that there are Africans there who don't take the words of other Africans seriously. So now let's go to a European and let the Europeans speak to the leadership in Ghana. And of course, it's embarrassing, and it might, now you're seeing all these statements coming from the Ghanaian government. It may actually lead to some sort of remedy, even if it's not a complete remedy.
Sister?
Well, my parents were part of the original wave of the African brain drain. Well, I shouldn't say the original, because actually the original would have started with the Ma'afa, or the African genocide called the transatlantic slave trade, because we know that they took the best and the brightest and the strongest that they could find, which is, and they were able to transfer all of that knowledge and those skill sets to help build, quote unquote, the West.
Correct.
That would be the first brain drain. But right before independence and following independence, there was another major African brain drain where they identified, I know this personally because my father graduated top of his class from Government College Umuahia in Nigeria, was immediately plucked by Shell BP to work for them. And they identified him as, very bright and promising. And so they asked him to take this particular exam. He took it, he excelled, and boom, just like that. They're like, okay, we've got a place for you in the UK to study. And he was engaged to my mother at the time. And he said, hey, what happens to my wife? They weren't married yet, but that's what he said. He just impulsively said, what happens to my wife? And they said, oh, absolutely. Mrs. Fubara can come along with you. And everything was paid until he got to the UK and couldn't find a place to live because he's Black. But anyway, they would call to try and get a place to live. And when they call, the place will be available. When they show up and see this skin color, the place wasn't available.
That's happened a lot, actually, sadly, very sadly.
No Blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
But having said that, so he was sponsored not necessarily by the country, but by these multinational corporations. And the idea was to train their managers. It wasn't to train people who come back and work as though this is their sovereign nation. So on the one hand, comrade, I hear you about PhD candidates being able to go and get knowledge that they can come back to our countries and rebuild our countries with. But there's so much indoctrination that happens. And I would be interested to see what percentage actually come back. And when they come back, what ideas do they bring with them besides this ingrained sense of inferiority that we're never as good as these people? Now, we see that China did that quite successfully, sending their students abroad to acquire these skill sets. But I don't know what force they used to, but it was like, hey, you're coming back and rebuilding our country. But I think that also, and there's also this sense of pride in who you are as quote unquote a Chinaman at that point. You remember when they used to say you don't have you have less of a chance of a Chinaman or something along those lines. I don't know that we in Africa are doing the same kind of job to really instill this sense of responsibility, as opposed to this idea of, hey, let me go and make it individually. That's one thing. So I would say, I'm not sure what percentage come back, if there are any incentives that are built in, like, hey, you don't come back, then you are required to pay this back. I'm not sure. I don't have those details from this article. Having said that, I do think that, yes, there might be some instances where we need to send people to other countries to acquire skill sets, but we absolutely also need to be investing in our own universities. And look at who we send our people to. We're still following the same colonial tracks that were laid down from, before we quote unquote had our independence. Having said that, to send these young people over there and to treat them in this way, where you are struggling to feed, where you're embarrassed, where you can't even focus on your studies because you don't pay your bills, you start getting letters, they might not let you re-enroll for classes, you might not be able to get your grades, things of that nature. It does alienate the students, and it does make them more inclined to possibly not come back home. For what? If I can find a way to get my degree and then stay here. And so all across Europe, all across Canada, United States, so on and so forth, I don't think there's a university you can go to where you're not going to find an African professor or more giving their skill sets to these other nations instead of where we live or where we come from. And so, but then the other thing is, how are we managing our money? What is going on with Ghana and with their funding structures that they, approved for these young people to travel, know how much it's going to cost,
Right.
and yet did not set aside the resources to make it happen? But then the other thing is, as we're talking about reparations, shouldn't this be part of the conversation? You guys stole from us and starved us for so long. And where is the Marshall Plan to rebuild Africa? Think of how much the UK makes from foreign students. Dangote in Nigeria, the richest man in I think in Africa now, there was just an interview he did where he was talking about one of the ministers in Nigeria who has paid over $5 million for the education of his children in the US and other countries. And he says he's not making that kind of money from his salary. So where is it coming from? So if we even look at the amount of money from Africa that is flowing into the coffers of these Western universities, and remember, we pay a higher rate than domestic students.
Yeah.
That is something that Africans as a whole should be concerned about. But if we're going to send our young people to be trained, we definitely should not send them there to be embarrassed. We should have a system in place.
Okay. So I just want to pick up on a point you made toward the end. In terms of the Marshall Plan, in terms of the reparations, African misrulers are actually undermining our campaigns for that. Because if I'm a European ruler, I would say, why should I be giving you any reparations or any Marshall Plan, whether deserved or not, when you have a Paul Biya in Cameroon siphoning off billions of dollars? Why should I add to money that he's going to siphon off as well? So that's why I'm always very emphatic. We need to get rid of these misrulers. They're costing us in so many ways, right? First of all, costing us by allowing our weak, balkanized, multiple states to be taken advantage of because we are weak. We're too many. If we have one armed forces, one border, one foreign policy, one currency, they wouldn't be able to mess with us like that. One president coming and talking about reparations in Europe, people would listen to him. right?
True.
Because it could be able to exert consequences as well. If you don't take our demands seriously, why should we continue selling our resources to you? You see? So all of it is tied in together. At the end of the day, our best bet really is to keep urging our young people, let's get rid of these useless misrulers, the Musevenis, the Paul Bias, all of them. Let them be gone so we can set up this.
The Tinibus, I need to be careful. They might not let me back into the country.
So please, hush. we didn't hear that.
We didn't hear that. It's not already out there.
Yeah. I think Adesoji would find a way to make it.
Yes, I mean, truth be told, we have the continent is just littered with excuses for leaders. So.
Absolutely. Look at a powerful country like Nigeria, 240 or 250 million people. But the resources it has, unbelievable. We can't allow that. We can't. All of us have a collective stake in the success of Nigeria as well. You see?
Yeah. I mean, Ayikuyama in his book, Remembering a Dismembered Continent, talked about this idea of funneling money towards this so-called Western education, wherein we had the moment to reset our education to educate youths to build Africa up. But now what you have is the brain drain. They go out, they bring back the systems where it's so Eurocentric that it's not going to work. And it's not worked over time. We still continue to go there to get the same fit. It's like...
Well, it's doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Right.
Educate the middle managers who will come and ensure that things continue as usual, even though the white man is not there personally, that they've trained their replacement who will continue to think along the same lines. Carter G. Woodson talked about this, the miseducation of the Negro, that's applicable worldwide, unfortunately.
But I'm also willing to speculate that a Thomas Sankara might be able to send 100 people for training, and 98% of them would probably come back. You see?
I agree.
Yeah. Because I agree. They would believe in the project that he's carrying out. But I'm sent by Tinubu. What incentive do I have to come back? Think about it.
No incentive, especially if you go on the social media and see his daughter. His daughter is some kind of influencer and showing off money and so on and so forth. So their children are living, showing themselves on private jet planes and things of that nature. Hey, I want that too. Why am I going back?
No, we got to stop that.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's shocking. Sometimes it beggars belief. I mean, let's not even go down that road. Let's go on to the last and final story for the day. I'm minded of the comrade's time, and it's from the Caribbean. And someone asks, why the Caribbean? We're talking about the global Africa here. So it reads, Rebranded Plantations, How Empire Shaped Luxury Caribbean Tourism. Research shows that the British colonial wealth extraction system still influenced the region's tourist industry. There's a part here that I highlighted. So let's begin from here. It says, on the Codrington plantations in the mid-18th century, 43% of the enslaved died within 3 years of their arrival. Life expectancy at birth for an enslaved person on the island was 29 years old. And this was the incalculable human cost of the transatlantic slave economy. On the back of this suffering was built extraordinary wealth for British colonial powers. And it goes on, but there's this family here, the Drax family. And let me just say this. The Drax family is the direct line from the enslaved, as at 2 years ago, we still had a member of parliament of that same name. In fact, there was a book written titled, let me see if I have my copy here. It's titled Drax Hall. Yeah, and it's based entirely on 17 centuries of that, 17 generation of that family, and how there is a direct line between what is happening in terms of their capture of the economy within that sphere. And they are still existing today. We still pour into the economy. They still have estates where people go for grouse shooting and to have some pheasants and what have you. But yet, the luxury economy is on and running. And guess who wants to go on some of those boats? Ourselves. We're the ones who are constantly funneling our money into systems that have been used to perpetuate exploitation and extractive industries. In fact, there's a survey there where shows that most of these tourist companies are destroying the environment in innumerable measures, and yet we're still lining up to go on those ships. Over to you.
All right. So you said why Caribbean in the beginning, because this is relevant to the continental Africa as well. The same history, the same experience in terms of the colonial history, the infrastructure that was set up. The absentee landlords are still reaping the benefits. In this story, it says 80% of the profit is repatriated back to Europe, does not go to the domestic economy. That's the setup we have right now. We still have absentee landlords in Kenya, right? Think about that.
Yes.
All those lands that the Kenya Land and Freedom Army had fought for, so-called Mau Mau, the land that they sacrificed their life for, and they never got much of the land back. The land went to the African elite, including the Kenyatta family, and the European absentee landlords that are still residing in Britain. So I like this story. Mainly, I like this story is because it's using that legacy of slavery to show how the infrastructure that was set up during the era is still benefiting those that set it up, including the so-called tourism setup, which inherited that legacy and that infrastructure. And at the end of the day, it goes back to what we've been saying all along in today's show. That is, at the end of the day, it's our fault. Because as the article says, if these governments try to do something about it, the ships would just set anchor in another port, right? And they can only do that when you are not speaking
as
on
one
the same
voice.
page, when you have different policies. But if you have a policy that says whether you went to Barbados, whether you go to Jamaica, whether you go where, these are the rules that you're going to have to adhere by. Unless you have that, then you have no reason to complain to anybody. You will continue to be exploited,
Sister?
Which again is why it's so concerning to me that Trinidad and Tobago is so focused on what they need as their own little small island nation and not, hey, we are stronger together and we need to join forces with the entire Caribbean,
Correct.
the entire Caribbean nations to fight, the United States, the bully. And so reading this article, rebranded plantations, how do these things happen? So similarly to what Comrade Allimadi said, nothing changed after quote unquote independence in terms of the structures that are in place and what they're designed to do. We just put a different label on it, whether we now call it neocolonialism or whether we call it aid or IMF loans or whatever, but the system is the same. I think the reason it continues to work, though, is, again, how miseducated we are and how disconnected we are from one another. So when you see those ads for cruises and so on and so forth, and I've been on a cruise with my family, you are not seeing the information about how much waste it produces. And you think, oh, I'm going to Jamaica, I'm going to see my cousins, and I'm actually helping to build the Jamaican economy. That's really what a lot of people think. But you don't understand because we haven't studied it. And of course, they're not going to put that information out that, according to this article, and we know there's other information out there that buttresses these points, the countries are actually making very little. Now, what is very clear to me is that, particularly when they have these all-inclusive resorts or where they have members-only beaches, I'm like, wait a second. How did you come to own this? And how is it that the people of that land no longer have access to their own paradise because you've colonized it? So even when you talk about Epstein Island, or Tony Robbins, for instance, has an island in Fiji, and all of these things, it's like, how does that even happen? And who has been displaced for that to take place? But if we don't have these conversations, if we're not conscious about the decisions we're making, it's similar to turning on the TV or buying a ticket to go see a sports team. You're just focused on your enjoyment, your entertainment, and not seeing how the individual decisions we make impact everything else. And that we are participating in our own oppression by not thinking through to see. And, Kwanzaa is right around the corner when we talk about Kujichagulia, self-determination, or where we talk about cooperative economics. How are we ensuring that the resources we have are going to us and to help rebuild us, as opposed to continuing to shore up empire? And so I'm glad you brought up this article, because actually right now I have a couple of friends who are on cruises. This is a very popular time for people to be on cruises. But where are you going? What demands are you making? And yes, again, if the Caribbean nations will come together and say, hey, you can't play us against each other. This is the percentage, or this is the fee, whatever port, wherever. And then the article goes into how much of these nations, how much of their resources are even going into maintaining these ports.
Yes.
And then think about the energy cost. So it's like Nigeria. You go to certain places and those high scale, hotels have electricity 24/7, and you don't even have to drive down. You walk down the street 5 minutes, and there are people living in absolute squalor and darkness.
Okay.
And so these are all things that we all should be paying attention to. We can point to what governments can do, but we really need to be paying attention to what we can do as individuals as well.
All right. So this is not directly related to the article, but this is something that happened to a good friend of mine many years ago. She's a teacher in New York, and she had not been back to her homeland, Jamaica, for many years. She grew up here in the United States. So now she's a teacher. She has some resources. She's going back to the homeland for vacation. So from the plane to get to the bus that's taking her to the hotel, somebody asked, help her with her luggage. And then halfway before they got to the bus, he stopped. He put the luggage down and he put out his hand for the tip.
Mm-hmm.
She tipped him. And then a second person then carried the same luggage all the way to the bus. But then when he got there, he put out his hand too. So she tipped him as well. She gets to the hotel. She's on the line to register the hotel. And then it's her turn, and she's face to face with the receptionist now to register. And the receptionist looks to somebody behind her, a European, and says, yes, can I help you?
Looking past her.
The European, of course, refused to, step in front of her, right? She complains to the manager. So now her vacation is ruined. On her way back, and these, in our tropics, the plane, you come on the tarmac and you, physically climb the stairs to go up. She's approaching the plane, and there are the security folks in front of the plane. And she's asked to step aside to the left. And before she got there, she noticed that 3 or 4 other people had been asked to step aside to the left as well for extra screening. And all of them were people of African ancestry. Not a single European was asked to step aside. All of them just waved in to stop boarding and climbing the stairs. When it got to her turn, and when they told her that, it was Europeans who were around her who said, no, we're not going to let her do that unless you ask us to step aside as well. Think about that. She said, Milton, that's the last time I'm ever going to set foot in Jamaica. So I was reminded of all of this.
What is that about? Colonized minds.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yes, I managed for us to end on a happy note rather than that somber note. We're going to mark the new year. Sister Aya and I are going to start a new podcast titled Grill and Books. I'm going to post the book lists in the community post. We'll take it from there. So look out for the community post.
It's about time. It's about time. There are many books that our own people need to know.
Yes.
So kudos to that.
If we keep talking about education, yes, we need to do something about it.
Kudos for that.
So we're going to be reading one book a month. And so the last Saturday of each month at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sister Aya and another guest or couple of guests will sit and talk about their takes on the book. And then we'll, do work on our minds. To quote the great ancestor, it's time to decolonize the mind.
Excellent.
Yes.
So our host, Adesoji, is a very humble individual. He gets total credit for this idea, always thinking how to problem solve and putting more work on my table. But listen, I embrace it wholeheartedly because I truly believe you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem.
Very good.
And all of us, we are at war. All of us need to be part of the solution. Of course, Comrade Milton, you know that you're going to be spearheading a couple of those books as well. And we can't wait to do Manufacturing Hate as one of the books that we study together. But this is just really the work that we must do at this time and bring more young people along as well. Because other people are setting up their think tanks. Mm-hmm. They are setting up their platforms to indoctrinate and radicalize people.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We definitely have been infected with this sense of inferiority and self-hatred, and we must do our part to try and address all of that. So, Adesoji, thank you so much for your leadership.
Right. Very well.
You're welcome.
And
to answer a quick question, yes, there will be Q&A whilst we talk about the book. So we're going to be picking up questions as we go along in the course of what's it called? Yes,
I'm really excited about the guests that are coming in. So it's new faces, people with certain expertise, and so on and so forth. So hopefully everyone is excited too. The first book is Pre-Colonial Black Africa.
Pre-Colonial Black Africa by Chikati Diop.
Yeah.
So you will get the entire list in there so that you can buy. We encourage you to buy from Black authors, Black bookshops,
bookstores. Yes.
Bookstores. If you cannot do that, then use our link from Amazon. It helps the channel as well. So, and that said, we've come to the end of this week's episode. We will be around next week. Whilst you enjoy your Christmas, you can still have us. Yes. So, Comrade, thank you. Final words?
We fight on.
Yes. Good night and God bless. That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review Podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.